Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women, children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hard-working immigrants who cut his lawn.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare.
You know what? If I ever cry on TV, it'll be because Maroon 5 put out a new song. But that's it. You big.
You know the situation's dire when Megyn Kelly and Greg Gutfeld join forces like the Avengers of Wit, armed not with superpowers, but with razor-sharp sarcasm. And this time, their target isn't a cosmic villain, it's Jimmy Kimmel's oversized ego. Imagine late-night smugness crashing headfirst into primetime sass. The result? A glorious spectacle of verbal takedowns that left Kimmel clutching his monologue like a kid with a fraying security blanket. Thought Jimmy was untouchable in his comedy castle? Think again. This roast doesn't just sting, it scorches. It's not just hot, it's a full-blown satirical supernova. And the fallout? As public as it is hilariously brutal.
Day when I was on the primetime of Fox and you were on the primetime of CNN, a couple of hours after our shows ended, late night comics would come on, and they occasionally would make us laugh, Pierce. I mean, occasionally they understood that they were in the game of making everyone laugh. As you know, they've abandoned that game now, and they're just political operatives out there. Colbert, Kimmel, Seth Meyer, who I struggle to even mention that guy's name. He's such an absolute, I can't stand him. But anyway, it's just my thought bubble.
Jimmy Kimmel is what you get when late-night comedy takes a sharp left turn into a lecture hall. Think a middle school principal delivering a TED Talk on morality, but with less charm and double the self-importance. If smugness were a brand, Jimmy would be the poster child, his face plastered on every bottle, soy latte in hand, casting judgmental side eyes at anyone who's ever dared vote to the right of Bernie Sanders. It's comedy coded in condescension, where punchlines come second to preaching and the laugh track feels more like a sigh.
All right. So a Republican has won an election, and you know what that means. Jimmy Carter has to stay alive for 4 more years. It's also time for liberals to tell themselves that they're still right about everything and their hysteria and delusions of persecution are perfectly normal. Yet right now, they're melting like that stick of butter Joy Behar keeps between her thighs to prevent chafing. Case in point, last night, all the other late-night hosts threw a hissy fit. It's too bad Tim Walz is still grieving, or he could send them all a sack of industrial-strength tampons.
This is the same guy who once built his brand emceeing bikini contests and refereeing beer pong like it was an Olympic sport, now suddenly reimagined as the moral guardian of late-night television. These days, Jimmy Kimmel positions himself like he's the last fragile barrier between democracy and whatever GOP boogeyman haunts his progressive daydreams. But let's be honest, this isn't evolution. It's rebranding. The kind you'd expect from a washed-up boy band member trying to reinvent himself with a thrift store acoustic guitar and a self-published vegan cookbook called Tofu for Truth. And yet, like clockwork, he rises from the comedy crypt night after night, delivering monologues that feel more like soft-spoken sermons than punchline-driven entertainment. The jokes, blunt as a spoon. The impact? Somewhere between a damp tissue and a motivational fridge magnet. He's not chasing laughter anymore, he's chasing clapter, that awkward hybrid of applause and agreement that comes not from humor, but from preaching to a carefully curated choir. This isn't late-night comedy, it's a televised Tumblr thread where moral posturing takes center stage and satire has officially left the building.
Took a look at some of their reactions to the news of Trump's win. Look at this.
Hey there. How are you doing? If you watch the show regularly, I'm guessing you're not doing great. Yeah, me neither.
Let's be honest, it was a terrible night last night. It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare, for our climate. It was a terrible night for poor people, for our allies in Ukraine.
Megyn Kelly and Greg Gutfeld didn't just call him out, they stormed the gates of his echo chamber. kicked down the carefully curated FOD, and held up a mirror that even the studio lights couldn't soften. What they exposed wasn't edgy comedy, it was a hollowed-out version of it, where punchlines are pre-approved by HR and satire gets filtered through a checklist of trending hashtags. It's not fearless, it's formulaic. Less stand up, more stand down. Less comic genius, more like your preachy Facebook aunt if she had a studio audience, a production crew, and a teleprompter full of moral outrage.
Late night host Jimmy Kimmel is back on the air after taking the summer off. He's missed a lot. Kimmel says if you're not vaccinated, you shouldn't get a hospital ICU bed. But I'm not sure if Jimmy was being sincere because he wasn't crying. Anyway, it's just funny hearing someone say, "I see you," who nobody actually sees. Look, I don't want to suggest that Kimmel's show has become boring and predictable, but last night during the taping, people in the studio audience were changing the...
Greg Gutfeld, a man who can land a sharper punchline in 5 seconds of unscripted banter than Jimmy Kimmel can in 5 meticulously crafted hours, absolutely steamrolled him. And the best part? He didn't even need to aim high. Why bother reaching? For someone who's already face down on the floor of cultural relevance. Watching Gutfeld dismantle Kimmel was like watching someone pop a blow-up clown with a single, deliberate toothpick, quick, precise, and oddly therapeutic. Kimmel still clings to irony like it's a superpower, but irony only works when it doesn't come with a side of smug condescension. These days, every one of his monologues feels like a group project where he contributed nothing but insists on presenting the final slideshow with graphs no one asked for, jokes no one laughed at, and a tone that suggests you're being graded on your political alignment. Then comes Megyn Kelly, cool, clinical, and absolutely merciless in her delivery. No theatrics, no yelling, just pure precision. Like a surgeon, she didn't flinch, just carved out the illusion and held up what was left. A man who wandered onto the wrong soundstage, mistaking applause signs and corporate paychecks for moral authority. Kimmel isn't brave, or edgy, or insightful. He's an aging talk show host trying to cosplay as America's conscience while cashing checks from Disney and railing against the system from a multi-million-dollar set that has more LED lighting than a Vegas nightclub.
How much it costs to produce Jimmy Kimmel's show? I guarantee you it's tens and tens of millions. It could be as much as 100 million. I have no idea. You know how much Tucker's video cost? Nothing. You know how much Jimmy Kimmel, how many people he gets tuning in on an average night? Just last week, his average was, in the overall, meaning all viewers, 1.5 million. In the key demo, 236,000. Tucker would have been embarrassed to pull that on any night he was on the Fox News channel. That's what they're getting now. Tucker's numbers were 3 times what Jimmy Kimmel gets. And Tucker's little basement video that he did from clearly like his cabin that he broadcasts out of Maine in literally has 21 million views. Okay? 21 million views. Whereas, as I point out, on ABC, a massive network that comes into your home for free, that you have to make no effort to find, at best, Jimmy Kimmel can get 1.5 million. He needs to have a little self-perspective before going out there and hurling these insults because he looks a little...
This is the same guy who once treated reading mean tweets like it was some kind of late-night renaissance. The same guy who decided that tearfully narrating policy debates from behind a desk was his version of public service, as if America needed a comedian to process emotions on its behalf. What Jimmy Kimmel calls evolution, the rest of us might recognize as a midlife brand crisis dressed up in virtue signals. Let's talk about that so-called transformation. Once upon a time, Jimmy wore leather jackets, made frat boy beer jokes, and pulled pranks with a wink. Now, he wraps himself in moral superiority like a bathrobe, strolling across his stage with the solemnity of a TED Talk host on a guilt trip. He doesn't tell jokes, he delivers sermons, sprinkled with sarcasm, aimed at anyone outside his bubble of coastal sanctimony. He's not edgy, he's not rebellious. He's the substitute teacher who caught a kid drawing Trump in the margins and turned it into a week-long lecture on teachable moments. Meanwhile, Greg Gutfeld delivers comedy like a jolt to the system, unfiltered, unapologetic, and actually funny. No polished moralizing, no lecture disguised as satire. Just sharp, biting humor that remembers what late night used to be. irreverent, risky, and entertaining, while Kimmel monologues into an echo chamber of forced applause and performative empathy. Gutfeld actually connects with humor, not hand-wringing. And speaking of laughs, when was the last time Jimmy actually got one that didn't feel scripted? His audience claps like they're following instructions, not reacting to comedy. It's not laughter, it's live-action approval ratings. He's giving therapy sessions disguised as stand-up, delivered by a guy who used to wear a gorilla suit to interview bikini models.
Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women, children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hard-working immigrants who cut his lawn.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go, for healthcare, for our climate, for science, for journalism, for justice, for free speech. It was a terrible night for poor people, for the middle class, for seniors who rely on Social Security, for our allies in Ukraine, for NATO, for the truth and democracy and decency. And it was a terrible night for everyone who voted against him. And guess what? It was a bad night for everyone who voted for him, too. You just don't realize it yet.
It's not even the politics that make Jimmy Kimmel hard to watch, it's the illusion of danger, the pretense of rebellion wrapped in corporate packaging. He's not challenging the system. He is the system. He's safe, pre-approved outrage, a sanitized version of resistance designed for primetime comfort. Picture a former punk band signing with Disney, then dropping a soft rock album about the emotional toll of composting. That's Kimmel. He thinks he's punching up, but he's really just shadowboxing in a vacuum, swinging recycled jabs at easy targets and waiting for Twitter to hand him a participation trophy in the form of likes. Megyn Kelly didn't miss a beat. With surgical precision, she stripped away the performance and exposed the act. Jimmy's entire late-night persona is built on a fiction that he's somehow courageous for mocking people he disagrees with while seated safely inside a million-dollar studio surrounded by media allies and corporate sponsors. And then there are the tears. So many tears. He cries more on air than a Netflix docuseries about rescue puppies. Every political shift, every national tragedy, every slightly provocative headline, there he is, misty-eyed, voice cracking, milking just enough emotion to cue the applause. It's predictable to the second. The man's tear ducts might as well have a publicist. Because in Kimmel's world, vulnerability isn't a moment, it's a marketing strategy.
Tonight was the 96th Academy Awards show, and while you might have missed it, there was one clear winner. No, not Oppenheimer. It was sanctimonious leftists for their lead role in pretending they are better than you. Several people shared in this achievement. Winner number one, Jimmy Kimmel. For the fourth time, Kimmel hosted the Oscars before an adoring crowd of Hollywood stars who laughed and curried favor with the man who wore blackface so many times he's second only to Justin Trudeau in his fondness for the practice. Yes, some of the very same celebrities who wanted you to believe they were horrified after yours truly said in 2018 that people used to don dark makeup in order to imitate well-known black celebrities and it wasn't a big deal. Absolutely ate up the performance by Hollywood darling.
Greg Gutfeld summed it up perfectly. Jimmy Kimmel doesn't need a writer's room. He needs an intervention. Someone, anyone, to pull him aside and explain that just because he feels something deeply doesn't mean we need to experience it in high definition, complete with dramatic lighting, orchestral swells, and a teleprompter full of curated outrage. His show has devolved into a televised therapy session, one man's ongoing reconciliation with his Hollywood guilt, disguised as comedy. And we, the viewers, are held hostage like it's a mandatory feature in our overpriced cable bundle. Meanwhile, as Jimmy tries to outwoke the internet one self-righteous monologue at a time, his audience continues to evaporate. Turns out, people don't enjoy being lectured by a millionaire channeling a savior complex, especially one whose sense of humor feels like it's trapped in a creative time loop. His ratings are now falling faster than his punchlines, and that's saying something. At this rate, he'll be doing tight fives at Whole Foods, wedged between the vegan cheese samples and clipboard activists pushing climate pledges. Even his writers seem exhausted. The jokes land with the intensity of a feather duster. Every Republicans are evil bit arrives like a lukewarm hot pocket, processed, predictable, and bland. No edge, no surprise, just another chuckle soaked in condescension. Like he's breaking down civics class for toddlers. Then there's Megyn Kelly. She's not here for the act. She's here for the reckoning. She didn't just challenge the narrative, she cracked it open. Kimmel isn't controversial. He's commodified dissent. He's rebellion with a legal department. He's the hall monitor who rats on his classmates, then gives a heartfelt speech about unity during the school assembly.
Remember when Johnny Carson cried like a baby over Ronald Reagan getting elected? Yeah, neither do I. And you know why he didn't? Because his wife didn't keep his balls in a Tupperware container next to a box of tofu burgers. But the killer phrase was at the end when Kimmel said, "You just don't realize it." Because you see, he's smarter than you, and he needs you to know that. And his ego can't bear that there's someone out there more famous and more influential than him. I got news for you, Kimmel. The last time you mattered, Bruce Jenner still had a penis. Love you.
Even his delivery has transformed, and not for the better. Jimmy Kimmel now leans into the camera like he's about to confess to a Cold War conspiracy, whispering punchlines as if they're classified intel. It's less stand-up and more hostage video with studio lighting. He wants the weight of his delivery to do what the joke itself can't: be funny. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. It just makes the whole thing feel like a TED Talk held at gunpoint. And when he's not lecturing the audience like a disappointed civics teacher, he's desperately pandering, trying to cosplay as one of us from inside a studio that probably costs more to operate per day than most Americans make in 6 months. He wants to seem relatable, but it's hard to relate to a guy whose biggest struggle lately was losing an Emmy to Stephen Colbert. Gutfeld, by contrast, understands the terrain. He doesn't beg for approval, he throws punches, stirs debate, and lets the chips fall. That's what real comedy has always done: challenge, not coddle. Kimmel, meanwhile, wraps each joke in bubble wrap and a pre-apology. Don't get mad, I'm one of the good guys. That's not comedy. That's PR with a punchline. So here we are, watching a former king of late night morph into its most forgettable fixture, a man who once had edge, now reduced to gentle blinking and safe grins, like a screensaver that auto-plays when no one's really watching. He doesn't provoke. He doesn't entertain. He just softly reminds us, between the moralizing and self-congratulation, that once upon a time, he used to be funny.
Jimmy's career peaked with busty girls on trampolines. Now the only boob we see is him. He once co-hosted The Man Show. Now he's sobbing like he just watched Steel Magnolias 3 days into his menstrual.
Megyn Kelly and Greg Gutfeld didn't destroy Jimmy Kimmel. They didn't need to. Jimmy's been doing that all by himself, slowly, painfully, one monologue at a time. All they did was hold up a mirror. And what stared back wasn't bold or biting. It was weary, recycled, and about 2 punchlines away from complete cultural oblivion. There was a time when Kimmel knew how to work a room. Now, he delivers jokes like he's reading warning labels: cautious, uninspired, and legally vetted. But hey, maybe there's still a sliver of hope. Maybe he'll drop the performative guilt, rediscover the lost art of satire, and finally stop acting like late-night TV is a group therapy session for his conscience. Or maybe more likely, he'll just cry about it again. Because if Kimmel has a signature move these days, it's misty-eyed monologues masquerading as courage. And judging by the trajectory, the series finale of The Jimmy Kimmel Show will be less comedy and more confession, airing nightly on every network that thinks earnestness is a substitute for entertainment. He's not even phoning it in anymore. He's texting it in, probably from a wine bar in Malibu, sipping a vintage called Tears of the Common Man. His idea of being relatable: posting filtered selfies with celebrities who haven't been within 10 feet of a public bus, let alone a grocery store. Meanwhile, his punchlines arrive vacuum-sealed and expiration dated. And yet, he walks that stage like he reinvented comedy and personally discovered empathy. Spoiler, he did neither. He just put a pout on sarcasm and called it a cause.
Blackface costumes included his oft-repeated bit as basketball star Karl Malone.
Now, Karl Malone never seen no flying saucer himself, but if he do, that's gonna be a spooky time.
And let's not forget Oprah in a fat suit.
15 minutes a day is all you need to get your heart rate up to where...
Please, Miss Oprah, you're crushing my... Sorry, Miss Oprah.
Megyn Kelly and Greg Gutfeld didn't unearth some hidden scandal, they simply said what most people have been quietly thinking. Jimmy Kimmel has become the TV equivalent of kale. Supposedly good for you, praised by elites, and yet somehow still joyless to consume. Like kale, he's endorsed by people who act like they enjoy him, mostly because admitting otherwise might make them seem uncultured or out of step with whatever the current moral trend is. But here's the twist: those laughs he's still clinging to? They aren't laughs at all. They're polite nods of agreement dressed up with applause. That's not comedy. That's confirmation bias with a rim shot. Meanwhile, Gutfeld is out here pulling in ratings the old-fashioned way by telling actual jokes. And Kelly? She's doing what no one on Jimmy's writing team dares to do, calling out the obvious. Kimmel's punchlines have become pep talks. His show is less a comedy hour and more of a curated lecture series with commercial breaks and a laugh track for moral reinforcement. While the Emperor fumbles with his cue cards, convinced he's still dressed in comedic brilliance, Late Night quietly slips into a warm, self-congratulatory coma. And there's Jimmy tucked in, whispering punchlines through a haze of earnest sincerity. Sleep tight, Jimmy. Just try not to cry too loudly. Some of us are still laughing, but not at the jokes.
This past 2 weeks, they had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored? At the Kennedy Center. You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the Academy Awards in full blackface?
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Crystal. Billy Crystal. And do you know who's going to be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken inner city sort of urban accent saying she needs to darn those socks? Jimmy Kimmel as Oprah, as a fat-suited, black-faced, darning socks Oprah. Now, if you are of the left, that's
because real comedy has never been about protecting feelings or tiptoeing through curated outrage. It's about risk, truth, and the boldness to challenge comfort zones, making people laugh and squirm, often at the same time. Somewhere along the way, Jimmy Kimmel lost that plot. Between celebrity backpats and sanctimonious monologues, he's become a performer trapped in a role, the self-anointed moral compass of Late Night, cloaked in a velvet robe of humorless sympathy. But outside his echo chamber, sharper voices are rising, unfiltered, fearless, and actually funny, cutting through the noise with laughs that land and messages that don't come pre-approved by PR teams. Comedy still matters. It still has teeth, and the stage is a whole lot bigger than Jimmy's teary-eyed, self-congratulatory one-man show.